guests who are in a long distance place. Some are in Vienna, in Wien, and others are located in the United States. We will have someone to do our translations for us, so bear with me while we connect and disconnect from one language to another one. We will be switching. I want to introduce Maestro Leonardo Rodriguez Coria. He will be our translator today, and also Dr. Guillermo López Varela, who is also a co-author in one of those chapters in the book. The book is entitled Race and Environmental Justice in the Era of Climate Change and COVID-19. It's been edited by Dr. Tatiana Conrad, who is present. There is an order for each presentation. We have that in the poster that you received previously. So I will introduce each one of the participants. Then they will have a few minutes, like half an hour, to present about the theme, overall picture of the book in case of the Dr. Tatiana and her chapter, each one giving us some insights of the fruitful contribution that they made to understand the environmental risks, health issues, and the need for justice around the world. In the meantime, we will wait for the questions and answers at the end. If there's any questions before, just raise your hand and I'll be able to understand that you might want to speak something that you are missing or we want to rewind or move forward. Welcome, everyone, just there in Zoom. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I will begin by introducing Dr. Tatiana Conrad. She is principal investigator of air and environmental health in the post-COVID-19 world. She's a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of English and American Studies, University of Vienna, Austria, and the editor of the Environmental Health and Well-Being book series at Michigan State University Press. She holds a PhD in American Studies from the University of Marburg, Germany. She was a visiting fellow at the University of Chicago in 2022, a visiting research at the Forest History Society 2019, and Evelyn Fellow at the American Antiquary Society 2018, and a visiting scholar at the University of South Alabama 2016. She is the author of Climate Change, Fiction, and Ecocultural Crisis, The Industrial Revolution to the Present, 2024, and Docu-Fictions of War, U.S. Interventions in Film and Literature, 2019. The editor of Disability, the Environment, and Colonialism, 2024, Imagining Air, Cultural Axiology and the Politics of Invisibility, 2023, Plastics, Environment, Culture, and the Politics of Waste, 2023, Cold War, Hollywood's Renewed Obsession with Russia, 2020, and Transportation and the Culture of Climate Change, Accelerating Ride to Global Crisis, 2020. And she is co-editor of Culture of War in Graphic Novels, Violence, Trauma, and Memory, 2018. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you, Dr. Tatiana Conrad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for this introduction, and hello, everyone. Let me just share my screen with you. Okay, so you should be able to see it now. So I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to promote the book, but also to revisit some of its chapters. I do think that the topic is very important, so it's really that we have this opportunity today. The title of my talk is Conceptualizing Environmental, Climate, and Health Injustices through Race and Indigeneity, and Decolonizing Environmental Justice Pedagogy. Really very wordy and also very long. But I do need to specify that I'm the editor of the book, but I'm also one of the contributors. Today I'm going to draw on some of the contributions that I've made to the book, specifically the introduction and the conclusion, not the actual chapter that I've written for the book. But in the title I also try to kind of reflect some of those keywords that I thought were important in case of my introduction and conclusion, but also that's sort of where some of the most important kind of issues dealt with in the other chapters. Right, so that's the book, and I'm gonna show the slide one more time. Before I do that, so I just wanted to kind of also contextualize where this comes from. Marie did mention that I am the PI of the project Air and Environmental Health in the post-COVID-19 world. So this book is one of the research outcomes in this project. The project is funded by the Austrian Science Fund, FWF, and this is a project that I'm conducting at the University of Vienna. The link is here, and I'm also happy to talk about the project in case anyone is interested. There are a few things that I wanted to very briefly promote. I mean, the press is here as well, or the representatives of the press, so I'm not going to talk too much about this. But since these are some of the outcomes of the project as well, I thought I would mention this and also kind of invite you, in case you're working on a monograph or an edited collection and are searching for a suitable venue. There are two book series that I've established as part of that, sort of as a result of that project. One is Environment, Health and Well-Being, which is at Michigan State University Press, and the other one is Environment, Senses and Emotions, which is at the University of Exeter Press. So as I said, if you have a project and you're searching for a venue for the book, then do get in touch. I'll be happy to talk to you about those. We have also published quite extensively in the course of those 4 years that the project has been running. And I just wanted to kind of very briefly mention some of the highlights, special issues, but also edited collections. I mean, this is not everything. There are also quite a few articles and book chapters, but as I said, I just wanted to mention some of the kind of bigger publications. Along with Race and Environmental Justice in the Era of Climate Change and COVID-19 that we're going to talk about today, we've also published Imagining Air, Cultural Archaeology and the Politics of Invisibility, as well as most recently Materiality of Air, both with the University of Exeter Press, and also a special issue of Open Cultural Studies, Cultures of Airborne Diseases. I would also like to emphasize that all these publications are open access, so you don't need to pay for those, and in case you're interested in the titles, the issues, then do download the books and the special issue. I hope that they will be helpful in your research. All right, so on that note, I guess I'm just going to move to my presentation. Social justice is tightly linked to many other forms of justice. When studying the effects of climate change, COVID-19, and environmental transformation on Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities around the world, it is crucial to understand that these types of injustice selectively target people of color because of the lack of social justice, compounding the inequality and oppression that the people are already experiencing. Social injustice both provokes and sustains other forms of injustice, of which environmental, climate, and health injustices are prime examples. Scholars from various disciplines have energetically engaged with the issues of social and environmental justice. Informed by this important research, race and environmental justice in the era of climate change and COVID-19 is both a scholarly contribution to the ongoing discourse and a form of activism for environmental, climate, and health justice. Using race and indigeneity as an analytical lens. The book explores how justice in the era of climate change and COVID-19 is envisioned, depicted, and achieved. Examining the relationships among humans and environments, this edited collection, in line with multi-species justice scholars, recognizes that it is crucial to broaden the rules of inclusion that constitute politics and calls for new political imaginaries that take into account the ontological diversity, relational complexity, and incommensurable forms of communication and desire within which just arrangements and outcomes can be co-crafted. While this book largely focuses on humans and environments, its explorations of justice as well as injustice help not only to illustrate the wide health and safety gap between individuals, communities, and even nations living under different environmental conditions, but also to move beyond the human toward justice for all. Instruments of culture, politics, knowledge, and communication, which multi-species justice scholars see as key in securing justice for the multiple species that inhabit and constitute the Earth, are also central to fighting inequality and injustice among humans and for envisioning and securing sustainable futures for all. This book operates along lines of social, racial, environmental, and health justice, exploring several research trajectories. It opens with part 1, entitled Air, Breath, and Visibility, as well as Invisibility of Environmental Racism. You can see also the contributions, or sort of the chapters that appear in this part. I'm not going to read the titles, but there are 3 chapters in this part, and here the contributors review environmental injustice through the lens of environmental racism, specifically drawing on air, breath, respiratory problems, and air pollution. This section demonstrates how environmental injustice can manifest in visible as well as invisible ways, targeting vulnerable communities in both the global north and global south. In the second part, this is just to give you kind of an overview of the structure of the book. So in the second part is entitled Health, Sustainability, and Race, and you can see again all the contributions. The contributors provide a deeper investigation of the issue of health as it intersects with the environment and race. The global focus of this section helps elaborate similarities in how race and health have become intertwined in the era of environmental crisis in different parts of the world. In third part, which is entitled Decolonizing and Implementing Environmental Justice, so this part provides practical solutions to environmental inequality. Drawing on the voices of representatives of BIPOC communities in both the global north and global south, the essays in this section explore cultural, social, political, and other changes that must take place to ensure environmental justice. And finally, I just also wanted, I did mention that there is an introduction, obviously, in this book, but also a conclusion, a relatively brief one, but I thought I would mention this anyway. So in conclusion, Decolonizing Environmental Justice Pedagogy, I gesture to other sides of inquiry, the outcomes of decolonial environmental justice, and what readers may want to consider next. I also claim that it is crucial to include environmental justice in curricula and emphasize that race and environmental justice in the era of climate change and COVID-19 can be used to teach race and environmental justice. So recently, scholars working on environmental justice and multi-species justice in particular have called for a transformation in justice, emphasizing the need to reconsider the ways both the subject of justice and the telos of justice itself are understood. Part of this work is to recognize race as the key lens through which injustice can be traced, identify the exact locations and people, that is individuals, communities, and nations affected by environmental conflict, and outline clear ways in which environmental justice can be restored, including via eradication of environmental racism. Regions and nations in the global south experience the effects of climate injustice with full force, while at the same time they largely develop and sustain the global north through natural resource extraction. This process of unequal, corrupt, and sometimes even criminal extractivism for the economic benefit of the global north degrades Earth's major domains, including air, water, and soil, triggering environmental crisis. Literary scholar Jennifer Wenzel claims that the consequences of such extractivism are a borrowing against, even theft of, other people's futures. It is thus essential to not only understand the real ramifications of environmental racism and inequality on affected individuals, but also include those individuals in the processes of decision-making, particularly in cases when justice can be or already is sabotaged. Such collaborations can open working pathways to address grave issues. For example, there are indigenous scholars and activists who oppose the future-oriented temporality of justice in Western paradigms, emphasizing that the current neglect of violence and injustice will not bring communities to any just future. Taking into account and relying on these views as we work toward environmental solutions can indeed lead to justice for all. It is crucial to consider class, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, race, and ability as well as disability in environmental issues. Diversity studies scholars like Karen Bell emphasize that, for example, if the environmental movement can be more inclusive, it can improve its influence on policy and society. Who are the actors? So both those who intensify or maintain environmental degradation and those whose lives, health, and well-being are directly affected by it. And what events exactly, that is, instances of environmental injustice, environmental conflicts, etc., become popularized? This is an important question through which it is possible to identify very tangible acts of environmental injustice. At the same time, it is significant to understand that environmental injustice is not a unified phenomenon, but rather it represents a variety of mistreatment, conflict, and the effects thereof, and thus must be addressed appropriately to each individual case. Similarly, scholars from the Global South describe environmentalism as different in every country with its own unique characteristics and trajectories. Environmental injustice is a global issue, and only collective action can solve it. Scholars insist on the urgent need for North-South collaboration that can help solve or at least minimize the environmental crisis. Yet environmental justice cannot be restored through one method. It is a task of multiple activities that involve different people, inspect different cases, and ultimately fix different problems. Race and environmental justice in the era of climate change and COVID-19 draws on the issues of both justice and injustice. Injustice, the lack of something, is often more tangible than justice, the supposed fullness or perfection of something. To understand justice, one needs to fully comprehend the multiple forms of injustice experienced by select individuals and groups, and vice versa. To be able to address injustice, it is crucial to recognize the true meaning of justice. For this purpose, scholars emphasize the need to name forms of justice and injustice, including, for example, social justice, restorative justice, and distributive justice, in order to be able to produce a sense of action and agency. The world is in crisis, yet this crisis is experienced by individuals very differently, depending not only on one's location, but also on one's skin color. Environmental and health issues have become intricately connected to the issues of social justice. It is crucial to decolonize languages, behaviors, attitudes, and very real political actions that discriminate against and harm BIPOC communities. Contributing to the ongoing debates, this book supports the claim that functioning environments are a necessary condition for the fulfillment of other intersectional justices like environmental justice, social justice, and racial justice. Environmental justice scholars Tom Davis and Alice Ma note, it is difficult to make sense of a historical moment when you are caught in the middle of it, and difficult to tell if it even is a moment, or just a small part of something far bigger. Whether the historical change is already happening or humanity is on its way to making this change. Race and environmental justice in the era of climate change and COVID-19 is a scholarly endeavor to foreground the voices from world communities, provide solutions to environmental and health crises, and restore justice for all. Bringing together cross-disciplinary scholars and connecting the issues of environment, climate, health, race, and justice, this book attempts to uncover the often overlooked and neglected relationships that are at the core of environmental justice. Drawing on geographies and approaches from both the global north and global south, this book reveals the various manifestations of environmental injustice, as well as the consequences thereof. Emphasizing the global nature of the problem, however, the contributors demonstrate how race remains the key factor that guides the uneven distribution of environmental toxicity and unhealth more broadly, focusing on the cases of environmental injustice that oftentimes remain at the community level, rather than rising to a national, let alone global concern. As the book shows, while the local examples of environmental injustice might vary, the reason for it, namely power relations, structures, and institutions that cause and sustain these kinds of injustice, so this reason is very similar. These are the ramifications of colonialism that subjugated peoples and nature. And while colonialism as a political system is over, the ideology that it produced continues to be embedded into decision-making processes related to environmental, climate, and health crises, generating inequality worldwide. Unpacking these serious issues and working at the intersection of multiple disciplines, race and environmental justice in the era of climate change and COVID-19 contributes to the existing bodies of knowledge and ongoing research on environmental justice. Nevertheless, this book can only do some of the necessary work. While we are proud to help advance the important scholarly and activist work on justice, we also recognize that much is left to be accomplished. Intersectionality is key when addressing the issue of justice, and specifically in the context of scholarly research, we recommend that investigative teams should be diverse, both to better understand the problem and to facilitate inclusion. For example, research on disability in relation to the core issues probed in this book would uncover important new perspectives on health and justice. Exploring the injustices experienced by people who find themselves on multiple ages of disadvantage, like members of BIPOC communities with disabilities, will allow us to more fully comprehend the multiple ways in which injustice operates and penetrates people's lives. Furthermore, it will produce a better understanding of the type of activist work that needs to be done and changes that must be implemented on socio-political, institutional, economic, and cultural levels. Incorporating environmental justice in curricula is important scholarly activist work that educators can and should do. Solving the ongoing environmental crisis is impossible without possessing sufficient knowledge how and which anthropogenic activities transform and destroy the planet and planetary health, whom these actions affect the most, what measures might be taken to prevent environmental inequality, and why injustice persists. Environmental education is one step toward a solution to the environmental crisis, and situating environmental justice at the center of that pedagogy is crucial. This book is one such instrument for teaching environmental justice at universities and high schools. Though it is difficult to give any specific recommendations on how to best incorporate the book in a given educational setting, we are convinced it can provide solid materials for courses in the environmental humanities, anthropology, and cultural geography, as well as those that focus broadly on literature and the environment, globalization, race, and social justice. Research on decolonial environmental justice, including how to teach it, is ongoing. And this is perhaps the most crucial work that the scholarly activist communities have been doing to promote environmental justice, unpicking the complex intertwined issues, making calamities and injustices visible, including voices from BIPOC communities, and making sure that decision-making practices become inclusive worldwide. Theorizing and also implementing environmental justice on a daily basis in every practice, action, and decision is the only way to consciously fight for a better future for all. And we persevere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Conrad. We will give the microphone to El Maestro Leonardo so he can give us a summary of the presentation.
Buen día a todos. Muchas gracias, doctora. Bueno, la doctora Conrad nos ha dado un tour por el libro. Primero ha arrancado la sesión invitándoles a colaborar con ella. Si alguno de ustedes está investigando o está interesado en investigar sobre estos temas, pueden contactarla. Y también están disponibles los materiales en línea, completamente gratis, para que puedan utilizarlos. Nos hace el recorrido del libro. La doctora nos dice que bueno, la justicia social está estrechamente vinculada a otras formas de justicia, como la ambiental, la climática y la de salud. Las comunidades afrodescendientes, indígenas y de color son tal vez las más afectadas por el cambio climático, la pandemia de COVID y las transformaciones ambientales, debido a que estas injusticias se van directamente o selectivamente contra ellas, ¿no? Es decir, amplificando las desigualdades estructurales que ya existen. La obra o el libro, bueno, es un aporte académico, pero también es una forma de activismo. Lo que pretende el libro es visibilizar las experiencias de injusticia y además proponer soluciones para las comunidades afectadas. Es importante, nos dice la doctora, ampliar esas reglas de inclusión de la política para poder construir nuevos imaginarios políticos que permitan reconocer esa diversidad ontológica, las formas de comunicación inconmensurables y la complejidad relacional entre humanos y no humanos. Son perspectivas que pueden ayudarnos a pensar más allá del humano para alcanzar justicia ambiental y climática. También aborda que estas injusticias ambientales pueden ser visibles o invisibles y finalmente, bueno, se manifiestan en desigualdades en cuanto a salud, seguridad y acceso a recursos básicos. O sea que la injusticia no es un fenómeno único, sino es una multiplicidad de experiencias de opresión que conviene dividir para ir tratando caso por caso. Bueno, hay también ya parte del estudio donde se observa cómo se roban literalmente, digamos, los futuros de otras poblaciones, hay saqueo económico, ecológico, y eso muestra que las crisis ambientales no se pueden separar o dividir de las estructuras coloniales y capitalistas. Poder nombrar la crisis es uno de los esfuerzos del libro, nos permite reconocer y clasificar esas distintas formas de injusticia, ¿no? Lo que no se nombra, pues no se ve, y entonces nos permite poder generar ya una agencia, tener acción política y, bueno, pues sacarla de esa invisibilidad que existe. El mundo, nos dice la doctora Conrad, está en crisis, pero esa crisis es diferenciada según la raza, clase, género y hasta la ubicación geográfica, y resulta fundamental entonces hacer ese ejercicio de decolonización, tanto de lenguajes, de actitudes, políticas, y reconocer que los ambientes sanos son una condición indispensable para alcanzar las otras justicias interseccionales. Nos permite entonces, la doctora en el libro nos dice que este libro nos va a permitir encontrar, evidenciar esas relaciones ocultas o desatendidas que están dentro del campo de la justicia ambiental y no se puede resolver la crisis sin conocimiento, por lo tanto también hay que incluir la justicia ambiental en los planes de estudio como un trabajo académico, como un trabajo de activismo crucial, porque no vamos a resolver esta crisis sin conocer cómo las actividades humanas degradan el planeta, a quiénes afectan, en qué medidas se fomentan desigualdades y por qué se persiste o por qué persisten las injusticias. Por lo tanto, se tiene que hacer un esfuerzo de colocar a la justicia ambiental en el centro de la pedagogía decolonial o descolonial, tanto en universidades como en escuelas. La crisis ambiental, climática y sanitaria no puede entenderse sin raza o indigenidad en categorías de análisis, y nombrar las injusticias es ese paso indispensable para combatirlas y construir futuros más justos. Ese es, a grosso modo, el resumen.
Gracias. Thank you very much. We will move forward with our next presenter. She is Savannah Schoeffler. She's a project assistant for air and environmental health in the post-COVID-19 world, and a PhD candidate at the Doctoral School of Ecology and Evolution, University of Vienna, Austria. Austria. She holds a bachelor's degree in social and cultural anthropology and a master's degree in evolutionary anthropology. Her research has been published in Anthropological Review, Open Cultural Studies with University of Exeter Press and Michigan State University Press. She is a co-editor of the special issue Cultures of Airborne Disease, Open Cultural Studies 2024. She has presented her work at international conferences in the UK, Germany, Belgium, Denmark, France, and Spain. In addition to her academic work, she is a trained paramedic and has several years of experience as a medical assistant. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Just one moment. So I hope you see my screen. I'm going to present my chapter in the book Race and Environmental Justice in the Era of Climate Change and COVID-19. And my chapter is titled Fueling Toxicity, Fast Fashion, Air Pollution, and Slow Violence. In this chapter, I explore the complexities of fast fashion, especially second-hand fashion, its connection to air pollution, and also the structures of harm and inequality it perpetuates. So while second-hand clothing is often seen as this resource for low-income countries, I also argue that it can pose significant health and environmental challenges, effectively becoming a form of toxic waste. Just to give you some bit of a background, so 92 million tons of clothing waste end up in landfills each year. And the fast fashion industry operates on a so-called just-in-time model. So where large quantities of cheap clothing are rapidly produced under time pressure and in low-wage countries. And this system drives overproduction and overconsumption. And I use the case study of the Kantamanto market, which is located in Accra in Ghana. And Ghana is one of 15 other countries, including India, Kenya, Cambodia, for example, that receive nearly half of the world's second-hand clothing imports. And the Kantamanto market is specialized in the trade of imported second-hand garments, primarily sourced from Western industrialized nations. About 50 million kilograms of clothing are traded on a weekly basis, which culminates in around approximately annual total of 150 million kilograms. And this massive influx, which you can imagine, is supported by over 30,000 workers that are involved in the cleaning, repairing, recycling, and selling of these second-hand clothes. But around 40% of these clothes that arrive at the Kantamanto market end up in landfills and waste dumps near this market due to poor quality or just oversupply, which creates the major environmental burden which we're talking about. And then, of course, also the injustices that are very much interweaving with that. Just to give you kind of a background, on the left side you see an overview of the Kantamanto market, which is divided in different sections, so the railway station, the importer side, but just to give you a view of how big the market actually is. And on the right side, you see clothing bales, and that's how these clothes arrive at the Kantamanto market. They arrive via a container. A container can accommodate around 400 bales. And each of these bales weighs around 55 kilograms. So you can imagine how much clothes and clothing arrive at the Kantamanto market and are distributed along the lines. But how did it come so far that industrial Western countries ship off their clothing waste? Because before the Industrial Revolution, clothing and textiles were pretty much a luxury. They were a privilege of the upper class, as creating clothes, fabricating them was very labor intensive and took quite some time. But then key technological innovations such as the sewing machine, nylon, polyester, revolutionized the textile production and industry. So at the same time, these inventions also democratize the access to fashion, which on the one side is good, but at the same time, it also makes it possible that trendy clothing is widely affordable and you have pretty much access to different clothing styles on a daily basis. And that also introduces to a so-called culture of disposability, which sets the stage for the fashion waste we have to kind of work with and we're creating, and maybe even get rid of it. The question is just how to get rid of it. And in Ghana, there is this saying, Obruni Babu, meaning that white man's clothes, which emphasizes this phenomenon of secondhand clothing in Ghana. And this term alludes to this perception that the clothing found at the Kantamanto market, once owned by deceased white individuals, carries connotations rooted in colonial legacies and asymmetrical power dynamics. When you translate, or this translation as such, also highlights this disconnect between the Ghanaians and the garments they acquire at the Kantamanto market, underlining that these clothes were never intended for them to wear and never tailored for their needs. They're rather perceived as commodities that are accessible primarily to white individuals. So these clothes are often labeled as charitable donations that enter through Western donation systems, collection systems, charity bins, and so on, but they do very much carry with them a legacy of colonial power and especially white savior narratives. And as these imports also flood markets like the Kantamanto market, because this is not the only market, I just use that as an example, there is also a parallel decline in African textile production, which weakens the local industry. And also Ghanaians face this increasing pressure to conform to Western clothing aesthetics, with traditional Ghanaian dresses often dismissed as inappropriate or not fashionable enough, and so on. So what appears to be a generosity often obscures a structurally unequal system in which, in that case, Africa or Ghana bears the material and environmental burden of the fast fashion waste. And to kind of give that a bit more context and a theoretical framework, I used in my chapter 4 theoretical frameworks to kind of contextualize that. First, the actor network theory, which helps to understand the secondhand clothing waste as this complex network of humans, objects, ideas, and environments that interact with each other. Maybe think of a spider web where you have all those nodes and connections that kind of are dependent of each other. And it also expands this idea of agency beyond just people, including materials and systems that shape how waste moves and impacts the world. And of course, agency is not something that belongs to materials itself, but the people, the individuals that work along this spider web give certain systems, certain aspect of the problem or of the system as such, this agency. And building on this, the concept of waste regime, which analyzes how or looks at how social and economic systems govern waste production and management, also showing how second-hand clothing is entangled with global trade, cultural values, and politics, which are again also nodes in this spider web. And then toxic timescapes, which illustrates how environmental and social harms of clothing waste unfold unevenly over time and space, disproportionately affecting marginalized communities. So these harms are also very slow and often invisible, which connects to the idea of slow violence by Rob Nixon. So the gradual cumulative harm and suffering which is caused by pollution and toxic waste, and is not immediately obvious, but toxic over time. And together, these frameworks kind of show how secondhand clothing waste is not just a material issue, but very much a socio-environmental problem that shapes complex networks of actors, stakeholders, historical inequalities, colonial legacies, power imbalances, companies, ownership, and of course, enduring environmental injustices. But how does all that connect to air pollution? So we know air is essential to life, but it's also increasingly becoming a barrier of harm. Nearly 99% of the global population breathes in polluted air beyond WHO recommendation limits, with low and middle income countries disproportionately affected by that. And one contributor of that pollution is open burning. Open burning as such is a method to get rid of waste where no proper incineration or waste management systems are in place. And when you think in that case of synthetic materials that are like polyester, nylon, acrylic, viscose, and so on, burning those also releases toxic fumes, releases particles like micro nanoplastics that ascend into the air and can be inhaled, can be accumulated in lung tissues, and contribute to a range of respiratory cardiovascular diseases. So it creates this toxic timescape, or these timescapes, so long-term environmental harm that builds up over time and space, and is gradual, invisible, unequal, and very slow. So we see that secondhand clothing waste is not only a material issue, but it's a very socio-environmental injustice that is then tied to structural inequality and colonial legacies, and is also carried quite literally in the air that is breathed. And we also know air is not confined to a certain space, but air moves. And here, I'm not sure if you see the videos, but these are videos or Instagram videos from the OR Foundation, who work with the Cantamanto market and also sellers there. The waste dumps and landfills next to the Cantamanto market, you see the air that is pretty dirty, maybe even toxic, and the people working there that breathe in those toxic fumes, also the people living around it, and not discussing the environmental aspects of it when a landfill like that is situated near the water, maybe in the case of Ghana, and so on. So what we see is that secondhand fast fashion waste is a clear example of waste colonialism. So we outsource our waste, our garments that we don't want anymore. It's a system where the global north exports its clothing waste under the guise of charity, while offloading the environmental and social consequences onto the global south. So donation is often presented as a solution to overconsumption, and positioned as this ethical act of generosity. Why not give it to people who might need my old t-shirt or my old trousers? But in reality, donation is not a solution. It merely shifts responsibility elsewhere. So it reflects this out of sight, out of mind mentality, maybe even NIMBY mentality, out of my backyard, where the problem is considered solved once it leaves the northern homes and we cannot see it anymore, and let other people deal with the problem. So markets like the Cantamanto market in Ghana are very much flooded with these access clothing, which ends up dumped and then probably also burned, causing severe environmental problems, social problems, and even cultural problems. So this process is of course tied to also power dynamics. It's tied to the global north maintains this illusion of doing something good, while the global south bears the economic, social, and environmental burden. So what is presented as aid becomes a form of environmental injustice, masking ongoing colonial relationships under the banners of sustainability and charity. And to kind of conclude, I picked this image because I think it really vividly presents the problem. We see on the left side the glamour, the profit, the luxury we have when we think of clothes, when you think of Fashion Week, New York, Paris Fashion Week. And on the other side, we see that what we often just forget or don't care about, do not see, are the people creating, crafting, sewing, fabricating our clothes, working under horrendous conditions, under low wages, really being able to afford their families, maybe even working with materials and chemicals that also might have adverse health effects to them. So what we see is that the global north offloads the excess, the overproduction onto communities in the global south under this illusion of charity and sustainability. And what we also know is that the clothes we wear and then donate do not simply disappear. They move through networks of extraction, labor, pollution, leaving toxic traces along the lines in the air, in the people's lives, landfills, and so on. So what seems like a personal choice in giving something away is actually also ingrained in power, inequality, and historical justice. Yeah, so thank you very much. I think questions for later, if there are any.
Thank you so much. We hear you. Please.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. La doctora Schaefer nos habla sobre el fast fashion, explora este fenómeno donde nos explica que 92 millones de toneladas de ropa se desperdician, y bueno, que además de que se desperdician, esos 15 millones de kilos también contaminan. Nos lleva a una reflexión sobre que, bueno, la ropa no es solo mercancía ni identidad, sino es un artefacto colonial, también cargado de narrativas de poder. Y cuando explora este fenómeno del fast fashion, revela ciertas desigualdades, ¿no? Ubica el trabajo en el Cantamanto Market en Ghana y nos dice que, bueno, este lugar es un epicentro para estudiar este fenómeno de la ropa de donación, de segunda mano, que aunque se puede presentar como una lógica de reciclaje o de donativos, caridad, pues en realidad es más bien un vertedero, un vertedero global, donde estas toneladas de textiles, de ropa de baja calidad, principalmente muchas fibras plásticas, pues se van acumulando. Y esta ropa pues no se reutiliza, sino que muchas veces se quema, se incinera, y entonces esto libera humos tóxicos, tintes, químicos que contaminan el aire y afectan la salud de las personas. Ubica la doctora el inicio de este problema en la Revolución Industrial, cuando, bueno, con la invención de la máquina de coser en 1790, más adelante con la invención del nylon en 1935 y el poliéster en 1941, podemos ver que la producción textil pasa de lo artesanal a lo mecanizado. Y entonces estos materiales baratos democratizaron el consumo de ropa, pero lo hicieron pagando el precio de transformar la moda en desechable. Y ahí es donde comienza la normalización de lo que hoy vemos como el fast fashion. Nos explica el término Obruni Wabu, que es, bueno, la ropa muerta de los hombres blancos. Y repito, bueno, es un recordatorio de que este tema de la ropa es también un tema de colonialismo y de desigualdad global. Los países con mayores recursos exportan sus desechos bajo discursos de ayuda, y los países, digamos, del sur global cargan con los costos sociales, sanitarios, ambientales, ¿no? El aire se convierte en portador de humo, de químicos y de microplásticos. La doctora utiliza un marco teórico para explicar esto en 4 teorías principales: la de 2005, el Actor Network Theory, ANT, y nos dice que, bueno, esta teoría nos ayuda a entender cómo los actores humanos y los no humanos, o sea, la ropa, los químicos, el aire, interactúan en estas redes de producción, consumo y desecho. Después la teoría de 2007, el Waste Regimes, donde nos habla de sistemas híbridos que definen qué se considera desecho y cómo se gestionan, y esto nos habla de esa dimensión política y cultural de la basura. El Toxic Timescapes, sobre el daño que causa esta acumulación de residuos, que no es inmediato los daños, pero sí son profundos. Es una noción derivada de que, bueno, muestra cómo hay comunidades enteras que viven atrapadas ya en paisajes tóxicos permanentes, ¿no? Habla incluso de que, bueno, 99% de las personas respiran aire contaminado. Y el slow violence, donde, bueno, es una violencia lenta e invisible que ocurre de manera gradual a través de esta acumulación de contaminación y que, bueno, disfrazan la injusticia como enfermedad, ¿no? Nos invita la doctora entonces a hacer un análisis, una crítica, una conciencia crítica, mejor dicho, donde hagamos elecciones de consumo que, bueno, puedan sostener esta situación, o más bien contrarrestar esta situación y que nuestras compras sean más responsables. Doctora, ¿algo más?
Muchas gracias, maestro. Thank you very much to both of you. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker, Dr. Judith Lacampar. I pronounce correctly your last name? Lacampar. Okay. She's Senior Acquisitions Editor at Michigan State University Press, where she acquires scholarly books in several disciplines, including rhetoric and communication, environmental studies, and African studies. Previously, Judith was Acquisitions Editor for Cultural Studies, Gender Studies, and Jewish Studies at Lexington Books, then an imprint of Rowman and Littlefield. Judith holds a PhD in English from Wayne State University and an MA in American Literature and Book History Publishing from Friedrich Alexander University, Erlangen, Nuremberg, Germany. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm probably the least interesting speaker today, so I'll keep it somewhat short. I did want to take the opportunity to speak a little bit on behalf of the press. So thank you, Tatiana and Maria, for inviting me. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. It's exciting to see some of the conversations starting about this book that we're so excited to have published just recently. Usually what happens when an acquisitions editor comes to speak at an event like this is they will talk a little bit about the story of the book, of how the project initially, the conversations about the project initially started, etc. In the interest of full disclosure, I will say that I was not part of that very early conversation that Tatiana had with the folks at MSU Press. I joined the press after or when the book was already in production. But I can say that since joining the team at MSUP, I've heard a lot. I've seen and heard the team bustling with excitement about this particular project. We are all extremely proud to be part of the journey of bringing this important and exciting book into the world and in front of the different audiences. It has also been my pleasure to work with Tatiana since I've joined the press, both as we're sort of working through the final stages of this particular project, but also as she is the editor of the series that she mentioned that this book published in, the Environment, Health, and Wellbeing series. And so this is, we're very excited to have this book published as sort of like the inaugural volume for the series. I'll say a few more words about that later. But before I do, I just want to highlight the importance of this collection in its own right and focus on that a little bit. Typically when an acquisitions editor receives a proposal or a manuscript initially, we ask a number of different questions. We typically wonder we typically think about whether a book is necessary, whether it's rigorous, and then also is it generative in some way for readers, both inside and sometimes outside of the academy, depending on the type of book that we're looking at. Needless to say, this book answers all of those questions with sort of three resounding yeses. It focuses on, the focus on contemporary crises, both regarding climate and health, its representation of global voices, and its focus on justice make the book insightful, timely, and promising to have an impact on both scholarship and public policy, which can be a hard line to straddle, but this book I feel does this really well. So in this way, it is representative and therefore an ideal launching point for us and for the Environment, Health, and Wellbeing series. The series has sort of a goal to illuminate causes and consequences of human and more than human ill health around the globe while attending to possibilities of repair and justice, and in that way help readers understand the present, reflect on the past, and rethink the future. So in all of in the different ways that Tatiana and Savannah have already outlined, this collection really sets a great example for for the kinds of conversations that we're hoping to inspire with the series. I also want to take this opportunity and this situation as an opportunity to take a moment of gratitude. There are so many different individuals and people involved in putting together a volume like this. For anybody who has ever edited a collection before, you know that it takes a tremendous amount of effort to put something like this together. A volume editor is as much a project manager as they are a developmental editor. Volume editors keep their own vision for a book in mind. They encourage their contributors and support their contributors. They have to navigate peer review feedback and translate that and help each individual contributor sort of utilize it to make the best of their to make the most of their contribution. And then last but not least, the volume editors have to deal with us at the press and meet our requirements and respond to our emails and things like that. And Tatiana has done all of these things with expertise and grace, and it has just been wonderful to work with her. And I think the result is an absolutely outstanding volume that we're all very proud to be a part of. The contributors, some of whom are here presenting today, and some might be in the audience, have produced courageous and insightful chapters that promise to spark many fruitful discussions, some of which, again, we're seeing here today. And then I'd also like to give just a small, I don't want to hijack the conversation, but I do want to give a small shout out to the team at the press. Our production, design, and marketing teams are extremely talented and passionate people who care about the work that they do. And again, I think it's fair to say that the results shows in this book. And then last but not least, with a book like this, which focuses on marginalized communities and justice and developing visions for the future, there's always the question of how we can make the knowledge that's produced in these pages accessible to the communities to which it matters most. And so we're very excited that we're able to make this book available open access, which would not be possible without the support of the Austrian Science Fund that Tatiana has already mentioned in her opening remarks. So with all of that said, I will leave the floor to the speakers, to the remaining speakers, so that we can dig a little bit deeper into some of this exciting material. I hope that the presentations will spark some more conversations, and I'd love to see you all take some of these ideas into your classrooms as well. Thank you again for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to do the translation, so bear with me while I translate. La doctora representa a la Universidad de Michigan State University Press. Desde un principio, con mucho entusiasmo, colaboró en el proceso a que la obra concluyera con su impresión. Ella anota que no ingresó desde un principio, sino más bien fue cuando ya había sido aceptada. Para que logren aceptar un proyecto de esta envergadura, deben de contestar diferentes preguntas que están relacionadas con el beneficio que va a tener una publicación. Ella quiere anotar que ha trabajado muy bien con la doctora Tatiana Conrad, le presenta sus respetos y también asume que es una gran profesional. También señala que todo el equipo estaba muy contento y orgulloso del libro y que le da vida en el mundo, porque espera que este libro lo puedan leer diferentes personas, no solamente en Austria, en México, ¿verdad? Eso yo lo digo, sino en otras partes. El libro pertenece a una serie, así le llaman, book series, y el libro es, déjenme anotar aquí las series de la que es parte. I'm sorry, Judith, which is the series name? Do you know the name of the series that the book belongs?
It's environment, health, and well-being.
Okay, es medio ambiente, salud y bienestar, ¿no? Well-being. Ese es usualmente las imprentas crean un título a una serie de libros que se van a publicar versados en el tema. Y este es el primer libro que sacan de la serie. Entonces, de ahí la relevancia de mencionar que están muy orgullosos y contentos de que este sea el volumen inaugural. Piensa ella que siempre las respuestas fueron positivas con relación a las preguntas que hacen siempre en el press, si está relacionada con un impacto al mundo que tanto beneficia a la comunidad académica y en sí también a las comunidades. El tema pues está muy de la mano: salud, medio ambiente y justicia. Ella se toma un momento para tener también la gratitud de todo el equipo que está atrás de ella, es decir, todos aquellos que revisan el manuscrito, todos los que pasan por el proceso de dictaminación, los formatos, las fotografías, todo eso lleva un proceso. Entonces, ella reconoce y agradece a todos sus colegas que están atrás también apoyando para que puedan ustedes leer el libro que hoy se presenta. La doctora Tatiana también realizó el trabajo de edición de una manera profesional y fue un gusto trabajar con ella. Ella espera que ustedes al leer encuentren los capítulos de una manera muy fructífera y que cada uno aporte para ustedes en su investigación o para los caminos que lleven a cabo en el futuro. Es muy importante porque ilustra este libro las comunidades marginadas, la justicia ambiental, la búsqueda de un ámbito saludable y de esa manera coadyuvar a las políticas de diferentes países, estados, que lleven a cabo esos cambios que se requieren. Por último, mencionar que es de acceso abierto. Ustedes pueden descargar el libro. Ahí en el póster está el código QR y eso lo pueden hacer gracias al financiamiento que obtuvo la doctora Tatiana Conrad por el financiamiento con un fondo austriaco del gobierno de Austria. Sin más, eso es lo que la doctora Judith nos comenta. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Okay, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next speaker. Dr. Helen Bond. She is a university professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction in the School of Education at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She is also the former director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. Bond is a Fulbright Neuro Scholar to India, co-chair of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, UN SDSN, an executive council member to the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership at Howard University. Bond is also a faculty liaison to the Center for African Studies at Howard University. Howard is one of only 10 U.S. universities and the only historically black college and university, HBCU, designated by the U.S. Department of Education as a comprehensive national resource center for African studies. With a PhD in human development, Bond's expertise is in teacher education, education for sustainable development, and race and human development. Welcome, Dr. Bond.
Welcome so much. Thank you so much, Maria. I really do appreciate you taking all the time and trouble to organize this. And I want to thank you and all the other organizers. I've got a long list of thank yous that I must go through first, because this has been such a wonderful project. First and all, certainly to Dr. Tatiana Conrad, lots of back and forth, wonderful organizing, pulling us all together, making this project a realization. Certainly, thank you to the press. Much appreciated to the press that publish our work. The fact that it's open access and people can access it without those paid firewalls is absolutely wonderful. And I'd also like to thank the audience as well as our fellow co-presenters here today. I'm not going to take a lot of your time. I have a few slides I'm going to go through very fast. I've sent the slides to Maria, and you certainly feel free to share them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Will bear with me. Okay, I think we are here. Let me just move myself over just a little bit. And also thanks for, I need the little left section of the slides there so I can see how they're in order, and it sort of keeps me in order and on time. I'm going to do two things with the short amount of time that I do have. The title of my chapter in the book is...
Sorry, Doctor, you can take the time. We have 11:11. Okay. We have enough time, so no worries.
Wonderful. Right. I was doing a similar presentation just last week, and I literally had 4 minutes, so I'm still in that really fast time mode. The title of the chapter in the book is Future Tense, the Role of Race, Risk, and Environmental Justice. I'm going to talk about that chapter, of course, and the heart of that chapter is made up from a research study that is much larger, actually, than the data that I reported on. But it's really interesting and I think very groundbreaking work. I'll talk about the concept of future tense is what came out of our research toward the end, and I'll present the conclusions. Along the way, I plan to introduce you to our team. I'm the author of the chapter, but there was a great team that stood behind me in the research, a little bit of the results, and introduce you to some of what the students, the young people at a school that we work with told us. Go to the next slide. Here's the chapter in the book. I wanted to give certainly due space to that and the cover of the book. Now I'm going to introduce you to the research team. Let me say, and I didn't think, part of the research team was the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. It's one of the world's largest cultural research and education museums, composed of a wide variety of museums, and we worked with them on this particular project. And so I want to introduce you. I'm the author of the chapter, and I was the lead researcher. Heidi Gibson worked with me as well. Let's go to the next. Okay, yeah. Here are the teachers that were also a part of the study. Let's see here. It seems like my slides are a little bit out of order, but that's okay. These are the teachers that worked with us on the study. They both were part of a middle school around 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So, and I want to give due compliments to them for their good work, not only as teachers, but also as fellow researchers. This team was part of the Smithsonian, And they served as sort of mentors and co-researchers as well. Part of the work that we were looking at was how young people can be mentored in the field of environmental justice in their own neighborhood. So I just wanted to introduce you to them as well. Okay, so what questions framed the study and also partly framed my chapter in the book? And what we were looking at is a concept called pro-environmental behavior. So I'll read partly from that. I report on a study that really measures students' knowledge and understanding of environmental issues and associated risks. I've been doing a lot of research about race and risk and our understanding of risk, and the willingness or agency of students or individuals to engage in what we call pro-environmental behavior. And it's defined as any behavior or action that helps or benefits the environment or does little harm. We used a number of scales because we collected across a wide variety of concepts, and one of those scales we used was the environmental concern scale. It was used to measure the degree of importance students placed on certain environmental problems due to their perceived risk and understanding. And I have a couple charts in my chapter that report on that, although I'll share with you widely some of that data to give you a sense. What we wanted to know from young people that are African American or descendants of the diaspora, to get their understanding of the issues and what's important to them and what might drive their agency. That is really the crux. Some of the more distinct questions we were looking at is recognize how diverse individuals and groups engage in environmental issues of local, national, global importance. We saw that as the cognitive focus there. We wanted to understand their engagement in actions that also support gender equality and respect for diversity. That was our social, emotional aspect or focus. And certainly we looked at their increase in interest in STEM-related careers. I did report on some of this in the chapter. We really reported on, with this idea, this conclusion we reached around future tense, we reported on their pro-environmental behavior, their willingness, what drove their agency and motivation to act. Research design. Many of you are students and know that a research design typically has to ground the study. We use mixed methods. I won't go into it deeply, although I do in the chapter. We use both qualitative and quantitative methods. You see, these are the two lead sort of research agencies, Howard University, the middle school that is associated with the university, as well as the Smithsonian. We use 2 classes, we use 2 teachers, and we did focus groups, we did structured interviews, and we did lots of surveys, post-test and pre-test. That's just an overview. You can certainly read more about this in the chapter. Part of what we were looking at as in the study as an intervention or as a way to sort of get at some of these ideas, we were also grounding the study in the Smithsonian Science for Global Goals Environmental Justice Project. The teachers used some of these materials in their classroom. By the way, these materials are free on the Smithsonian's website, and they are grounded in the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which I work with as the USA co-chair of SDSM. So that's important to know as well. And I do have a quote or two from some of my colleagues that I collaborated with on this. Research results. So what did we find? From talking to the students, from interviewing them, focus groups, the surveys that we submitted, and I think you'll be, in some areas I was surprised, in some areas I was not, but it really led to this interesting idea about how students even though we're asking them about what is, what's motivating them to act in a pro-environmental way, we also found out a lot about how they think and see the future. So the idea of the future, or what we call future orientation, is very much so a part of our findings. Okay, measuring environmental concern. So what does that mean? We're asking what motivates students to act or engage in pro-environmental behavior. And so you see a pre-test and a post-test here. In one of the scales, they reported, I am concerned about environmental problems because of the consequences for my community. As you can imagine, we were very much so looking to see if we could move the needle here, and it looks like we did. We rated them along 1 star up to 7 stars, and we started out before. What intervention did we use? The teachers were using the Smithsonian goals, that particular curriculum, very hands-on. We moved it from 14%, 7 stars, to 43%. So that's interesting, this notion of community being community-oriented and community-activated. Next slide. Again, what are we doing? We are measuring environmental concern. What's motivating? What's motivating you? What's motivating young people? So obviously the planet, I didn't share here some of the pre-test and post-test, but each time it certainly increased. So there was a positive associated impact there. I'm concerned about the environmental problems because of the consequences for the planet. We have 7 stars. This is post-test sharing here. So, and it definitely was higher than the pre-test. So we see now that certainly community is impacting. They're concerned about the planet. And we had a lot, there was on the survey, there were lots of different things they could respond to. In the chapter, I do share one graph where I really display all those things. And you'll see a pattern that differs a little bit from the planet. You're going to see a great concern that people typically are motivated for their own health, safety, and well-being. So this notion of risk, understanding of risk, it certainly is there for the planet. It certainly is there motivating them, community, but you're going to see that we're also very motivated, these students, young people, but we see across the research, people are motivated for concern for themselves and those that they love, which makes sense. That's the empathy component. Measuring environmental concern. I am concerned about environmental problems because of the consequences for me. And even the pre-test results, which aren't here, these are post-test. The pre-test was pretty high, but they were higher after being exposed to the curriculum, talking to those research mentors that I showed you, and interacting with their teachers around education for sustainable development. Here we go. Measuring what concerns me, what's motivating me to act. Certainly my health. This audience, this was high before the intervention as we started the research, and it was even higher afterwards. So what's motivating young people? It's things that are very close to them and that could pose really significant risk to them, even though they did identify the planet, which is a little bit more abstract. These things are very core to their being and to their and to their understanding of what's important in this. This was really interesting, this notion of their future. It came out high even at pre-test, but even higher post-test. So what do we ask them? I am concerned what motivates you to act or engage in this pro-environmental behavior. My future. I'm thinking about my future. And this is one of the areas that I focused primarily on the chapter. This is what got me to this idea of future tense. We know that there's this concept called future orientation in young people and everyone really. what's your attitude? Are you optimistic for a bright future? Are you pessimistic? How do you see your future? And we know that young people that are more future oriented tend to do better in some situations. Of course, everything is situational, contextual, and things differ certainly across racial and ethnic lines, and we found that. So we found that these African American students are indeed hopeful. They are indeed looking forward to the future, but in a different way. I argue in the text, as you'll see when we go to the conclusions, that their idea of the future, their task for thinking and preparing for the future is quite different when you're in a society where there might be obstacles such as racism, discrimination, inequality, poverty, and other things. So I'm going to go, and I'll talk more about that, certainly. We also investigated, this is an interesting part, I didn't get to really talk about it a lot in the chapter, maybe we'll write about this futurely. We wanted them to do some of the imagining tasks, but that's part of a future orientation as well. Imagining what, their future and if they have a clear understanding of all the ways that a sustainable human existence would differ from our current state of affairs. They were quite undecided coming in and less undecided coming out, so there was some change there. I want to spend a little bit of time here. I'm not sure, I did see a little bit of the audience. I don't know if there's students out there or who the audience is, but I wanted to add some of the student participant voices. And we, as we're very focused on the future, and we know being able to imagine something. If you can imagine a better world, then you might be able to, find the agency, and maybe if there are resources to help create one. So we wanted them to do some imagining poems, and these are some of the poems that they came up with. And I'm just recalling here, I was presenting this at a middle school just about 2 years ago, I think. And I presented this. They were doing a sustainability symposium. And I actually had a student or two to come up and actually read this particular poem. I'm not going to read it to you today, but it's so beautiful that middle school students could come up with this. If I might read a line or two for you, because I just think it's so beautiful. They created this as a part of our research study. Smoke in the air, nowhere left to breathe. A lot of police around, nowhere to leave. A lot of people wondering, nowhere to stay, no playgrounds in the area, nowhere to play. I just thought, and I'm not going to read the rest of it, but it's such a beautiful poem, and it speaks to how they're seeing their present, and of course, how they see their present often will evoke how they see their future. I wanted to share one more beautiful poem. I won't read part of this to you. You'll have the slides. Nature is irreplaceable. Just what a beautiful. When I presented this at a school, I actually had 2 young students come up and read part of the poem. It's just quite beautiful here. This is some work from the teachers showcasing some of the students' work in this research project, in this curriculum that is open access on the Smithsonian's website. It does center justice, and I think that's very important. And that's why I'm so appreciative of Dr. Conrad's work and all of your work, how you center justice and inequality in this work. So, conclusions. And I just really brought in the ones that are just, very relevant to our work, and I'll read and paraphrase, if I might, some of this. What we found out, certainly, is responding to risk is dependent on how we understand and really perceive that risk. And we know from this study that students are looking at the future with a hesitancy. We are calling it future tense, meaning I have a future, I know it's out there, but can I really achieve it in the current context, the way things are shaping up? And risk, of course, risk communication, we talked a little bit about that. in the chapter COVID-19, climate change requires trust and behavior change and how we perceive and understand risk. And this was a big one here. And if I can just stop and sort of highlight that for us. Oops. That it highlighted in a way that, let me just take that off. Give me just a second there. Just put the wrong thing. Okay, there we go. This is big. How we perceive and understand risk can partly impact our willingness to change. So understanding risk perception, I think there needs to be more research around that, and centering justice as a part of that. We found the reasons for environmentally friendly behavior, that notion of pro-environmental behavior, differs widely across social groups and situations, and a number of factors are thought to predict agency. And this notion of future orientation and future tense is playing a role. We're not suggesting cause and effect, we're certainly looking at correlation. Number 3, what do we find? People are generally concerned about environmental problems because of the consequences to themselves. People tend to think about themselves and their family and those that they love, and then that concern also tends to circle outward. Number 3, and the perception of injustice, we definitely found that in our work, and was another huge motivator for concern and action. They're thinking about themselves and their communities. Typically, students talked about the role of the police or the role of poverty. So they were looking at physical injustices, social injustices, and really thinking of it in a quite sophisticated manner, might I add. Number 4, one's relationship to the environment is also an important driver of environmental concern. Trying to measure that relationship is different. We used a number of measures, and a lot of interesting things came out. Sometimes students, depending on how we phrased the question, felt closer, a part of nature, and sometimes they did not. So sometimes the way the questions are asked can certainly drive those conclusions. Second set, I'll go through them quickly, but I think they're important. Students really did express a need for role models in this. When I introduced you to 3 very stellar role models from the Smithsonian, and it piqued their interest, not only just a career in science, but also, hey, I see people like me, and I think that I can show agency to do something. And imagining a more just and sustainable world is very important. Being able to imagine enables the agency to create something better. 7, students recognize the urgency regarding environmental degradation and injustice, but not always clear what to do. They are just in middle school, they're just 7th and 8th graders, but they did recognize the power of their voice in unison. They were very apt on social media, and they realized that they could be heard that way. Number 8, I think this is very strong. By drawing on the cultural assets and talents of students, educators can really, really engage students in what we call, and the curriculum calls, the development of sustainability mindsets, as well as seeing people like them, women and underrepresented minorities in the field. It's wonderful to see the audience there. Thank you for listening so well. I am going to wrap up, look forward to your questions, and want to say thank you so much. Please feel free to contact me. I'd like to work with you further on this, and much appreciative. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I will do the translation. Bear with me while I try to bring everything to a very cohesive translation. La doctora Bond nos presenta el proyecto por el cual ella devino el capítulo que está en la publicación. Es un proyecto de investigación de mayor envergadura. Lo que aparece en el capítulo es solamente una sección presenta el equipo de investigación que está involucrado en dicho proyecto. Una parte son los museos Smithsonian que están ahí en Washington y cada uno contribuyó de diferente manera, está contribuyendo porque es una investigación en curso. También están maestros y maestras de una escuela de nivel medio que es como la secundaria. Y nos proyectó a los maestros. Ella agradece la colaboración de esos maestros, tanto en el aula como en la parte de investigación. Asimismo, nos presentó unas preguntas de investigación, desde donde surge la idea de enfocarse solamente en una temática para este capítulo. Hay dos paréntesis que quiero hacer. El énfasis de su investigación es en lo que se ha denominado en inglés PEB, que es Pro-Environmental Behavior, que sería en español un comportamiento a favor del medio ambiente. No podemos utilizar PEB en español si no hacemos alusión, o sea, las siglas no las podemos utilizar si no hacemos alusión a lo que significa en inglés. Pero en términos generales es estudiar la agencia de los estudiantes, en este caso, de los que van a la escuela secundaria, sobre el medio ambiente, cómo se posicionan y toman acción en beneficio de ellos. En términos generales es qué mueve a los estudiantes para estar en estos espacios que se crean a favor del medio ambiente. Mejorar la comunidad. Ella también utilizó otro término, que no sé si lo vieron en su presentación. El término es B, que significa black, pero se refiere a la población afrodescendiente, indígena, que es I, y personas de color, people of color. Entonces, ese término se relaciona o encapsula a las poblaciones que han sido menos favorecidas a través del tiempo, ya sea por el colonialismo existente, que persiste, el racismo y la discriminación. En este caso, los estudiantes que van a esas escuelas en donde se realizó se está llevando a cabo ese proyecto son afroamericanos. De ahí se tiene un perfil que no va acorde con la mayoría de la población, que puede ser en un momento dado favorecida y que no tiene una historicidad de racismo, discriminación, pobreza, y además de tener otras consecuencias que afectan su salud, bienestar, y que va de la mano con el medio ambiente. Uno de los puntos claves que señala en una de esos filminas es que los estudiantes toman posesión, es como proacción de dónde estoy y qué es lo que quiero en un futuro. Entonces, en eso ella enfocó a dos filminas específicamente, una donde decía la palabra justicia y estaba expuesta por un trabajo de los estudiantes, y el otro poesía, ¿no? Entonces nos hizo una demostración que ilustra muy bien y también nos informa, por eso aparece ahí su correo electrónico, en donde nos hace una atenta invitación a que la contactemos para que los maestros, que por cierto aquí hay maestros, nos puedan, de cierta manera, puedan ellos ayudarse o accesar los materiales que ya han creado para uso de las escuelas o de las universidades en esto de justicia ambiental y proambiente. Entonces, ella mostró otra filmina en donde también estaba la palabra justicia y medio ambiente, y todo eso dice que hay materiales que están también conectados con la Organización de las Naciones Unidas y se puede hacer uso de ellos con toda la legalidad, sin problema. Entonces yo los invito a que en algún momento puedan contactarla y también les da la bienvenida por si quieren colaborar con ella o en un futuro trabajar. Entonces, en las gráficas nos mostró un porcentaje significativo de los estudiantes que señalaban que no hay bienestar, salud y la necesidad de crear esa conciencia para el beneficio del medio ambiente en su comunidad y en su persona. ¿Cómo se visualizan en unos años, desde este momento en el futuro? Y bueno, entonces uno de los resultados es precisamente cómo podemos subsistir al cambio climático, a enfrentarnos a los riesgos de salud, lo que ilustra el libro y se ilustra en su capítulo, al COVID-19, y cómo a través de nuestros comportamientos, lo que se llama pro-environment behavior, lo que es un comportamiento a favor del medio ambiente, podemos nosotros tomar conciencia y ejecutarlo, agencia. Entonces, su perspectiva de la doctora es, desde la agencia de los jóvenes, ¿qué pueden hacer para transformar el nicho en donde ellos habitan? Es de corto y largo alcance y que tengan un rol más activo. Cada grupo respondió de diferente manera. Se pueden encontrar patrones, pero no quiere decir que la población es homogénea, ¿no? Hay diversidad, pero sin embargo se centra en lo que se puede considerar como un patrón que se repite entre los diferentes estudiantes y cómo se despliega esa agencia. En resumidas cuentas, lo que se busca es evitar una degradación constante y creciente del medio ambiente. Cualquier duda, ella nos invita a que le hagan preguntas al finalizar la última presentación de este libro. Thank you. Gracias. We have a camera that you can locate it better who we have as our audience, and you can perceive the diversity that we have also here. So let me introduce the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Guillermo López Varela. I'm going to give his bio, and I hope that we will welcome him as we deserve in this place. El doctor Guillermo López Varela, he is a research professor at the Complejo Regional Sur en Tehuacán. Él es profesor investigador. He is research professor at the this place in the university is located for a satellite of our university, and is located in the southern part of Puebla. So the region is called, or the city is called Tehuacán. He also works at the Escuela Normal Superior. We have also from both institutions, we have representation today, so welcome. Y ahí también es profesor investigador. He is currently developing participatory action research projects in the Nijihua region of Puebla, Mexico. He is coordinator of the working group Food from the Americas of the Latin American Sociological Association 238. He is also contributor and member of the academic group Pueblos Originarios, su bienestar físico, mental y cultural a lo largo de la vida, BUAP-BIEP 2020-23. He has published articles, books, and book chapters in Canada, the United States, Colombia, Greece, Guatemala, Mexico, and Argentina. He is a member of the National System of Researchers and Registry of the Mexican Ministry of Public Education. We welcome you, and it is an honor to have you.
Muchas gracias, Cristi, por propiciar, incentivar este encuentro en el Instituto de Ciencias Sociales, y que ha sido casa de muchas y de muchos, que es casa de todos y de todas. Incentivamos mucho a los estudiantes a venir a estudiar aquí. Van a encontrar un gran escenario, ¿no? Muy propicio para el pensamiento crítico, para la acción vinculante. Agradezco a todas y a todos los presentes y a los trabajadores y trabajadoras de este instituto que solventan y vinculan tantos acontecimientos significativos año con año. Bueno, voy a plantear algunos posicionamientos que tienen que ver con el artículo que la doctora María Cristina y su servidor junto con Sol Tiberovsky escribimos para este libro. Y el primero tiene que ver con muchas gracias, con la reflexión en torno a pandemia o sindemia, ¿no? Desde la reflexión situada de nosotras como investigadores, ¿no? Pues en particular, ¿no? Nos decantamos por el concepto de sindemia porque la idea de sindemia es la idea de la sinergia que expresa las consecuencias que la pandemia produjo, ¿no? En los territorios, no solamente a nivel sanitario, sino también demográfico, social, cultural, económico, político y en otros órdenes, ¿no? Es decir, la sindemia en nuestra perspectiva produjo un conjunto de transformaciones que aún estamos intentando comprender, ¿no? En otro momento, también nos parece muy importante hablar de la clave de la vulnerabilidad, ¿no? Es decir, aquí yo planteo la idea de que el acompañamiento para propiciar este artículo, este capítulo del libro, ha tenido que ver con un diálogo incesante con estudiantes inguiguas de la comunidad de San Marcos Tlacoyalco, ¿no? Donde, digamos, se expresa, ¿no? Que solamente el 3% de poblanas y poblanos en nuestro estado acceden a la educación universitaria, de acuerdo a cifras del Instituto Poblano de los Pueblos Indígenas. Entonces, estamos hablando de un entorno de exclusión y de invisibilización que es histórico y es, pues, muy comprometedor, ¿no? Ahora, ahorita viene. Otro de los grandes temas es que hablando, ¿no? en las semanas previas a la Jornada Nacional de Sana Distancia, que fue propiciada por el gobierno mexicano, hablábamos con los jóvenes estudiantes de esta comunidad planteándoles sus imaginarios en torno a la pandemia, ¿no? A lo que iba a ser la jornada de preservación de la sana distancia, y nos planteaban dos escenarios, ¿no? Que retomamos en el capítulo, ¿no? Uno, en un primer lugar, tenía que ver con lo siguiente, ¿no? Decían los compañeros y compañeras, ojalá que en este momento la población mexicana que no tiene un vínculo campesino sea consciente de que acceder a una alimentación sana, cercana y soberana depende del campesinado, ¿no? Y no solamente poblano, sino global, ¿no? Y otra dimensión que planteaban era que bajo los parámetros de las prácticas comunitarias, políticas, campesinas, agrícolas, ¿no? Incluso de cosmovisiones y cosmaudiciones, para ellos la Jornada Nacional de Sana Distancia no existió. Es decir, ellos no podían dejar que sus animales se quedaran en una parte de sus casas, tenían que sacarlos a pastorear, tenían que ir a ver a su milpa, tenían que cultivar el ciclo agrícola, no podían simplemente quedarse a mirarse, ¿no? En casa, ¿no? Para ellos las prácticas propias del territorio incentivaban que no existiera esta idea del encierro, ¿no? Que en el contexto urbano pues sí existió. A ver, va a ser con este. No, se trabó un poquito. Sí, yo. No, bueno. Y después, otro de los grandes temas que fue transversal es el tema de la migración, ¿no? Los migrantes de retorno, por una parte, como un sujeto a investigar que presentaba muchos desafíos de comprensión de qué estaba ocurriendo en la sindemia, y las madres jefas de familia, ¿no? Como primeros frentes de la sindemia de COVID-19, al menos en lo que pudimos investigar en la región inguigua poblana. ¿A qué me voy a referir con esto? Vamos a insistir a lo largo del capítulo de que el encierro, la preservación de la sana distancia fue un privilegio de clase, lo cual implicó que los circuitos migratorios que se incentivan en la región inguigua de Puebla, pues nunca se suspendieron, es decir, en la obra, en la fábrica, en la maquila, en el campo, siempre se preservó las mismas lógicas, es decir, la sindemia no transformó mucho, porque, por ejemplo, en el ámbito de la maquila se seguían dando las mismas dinámicas. Incluso podríamos plantearles que se agravaron y agudizaron. Es decir, en lugar de de que los trabajadores de la maquila en la región Inguigua pues los mandaran a descansar, digamos, ¿no? Lo que pasó fue una reconversión productiva, es decir, en lugar de hacer, no sé, camisas, empezaron a hacer toda la indumentaria concerniente al personal sanitario, ¿no? Y no descansaron, ¿no? Y entonces lo que pasaba fue, pues propiamente, permítanme, creo que ya está reaccionando. Eso. Muy bien. Vamos acá. Muy bien. Fue que los índices de contagio en contextos de hablantes de lenguas originarias, de acuerdo al informe epidemiológico, muchas gracias, pues refirieran, ¿no?, que las poblaciones indígenas en nuestro país estuvieran enfermando con mayor intensidad, ¿no? Así fue como lo representaron los informes epidemiológicos, que tenían al estado de Puebla como la quinta entidad con mayor prevalencia de contagios, ¿no? Entonces, contrastábamos nosotros estos datos, ¿no? Ustedes pueden consultar esos informes epidemiológicos. Siempre Puebla fue el tercer, cuarto o quinto estado a nivel nacional. Y lo que veíamos era concordante con lo que escuchábamos y acompañábamos, ¿no? Nuestros estudiantes en la región Inguigua, que por las tardes iban a la maquila y durante las mañanas todo el tiempo estaban haciendo una actividad fuera de sus hogares, nos contaban, ¿no?, esta situación de vulneración, de vulnerabilidad y de agudización de las relaciones sociales de producción de capital. Entonces, eso es algo que también, pues, por eso les decía que aún queda por comprender las implicaciones e incidencias. Y los circuitos migratorios, ¿no? Pasaron dos escenarios. Ustedes quizás recordarán que algunas comunidades se blindaban, ¿no? Evitaban que entraran y salieran personas, ¿no? En el caso de San Marcos Tlacoyalco no existió eso porque cada comunidad tomaba un acuerdo comunitario para propiciar si hacer ese cierre o no. Y en San Marcos decidieron mantener abierta la comunidad, ¿no? Porque también hay toda una violencia que viene de la vida económica, ¿no? Donde, por ejemplo, para San Marcos no se puede hacer vida si no acudes al centro de abasto más próximo, que es Tlacotepec de Benito Juárez. Es decir, hay muchos productos, incluidos, por ejemplo, medicinas, ¿no?, y la atención de muchos servicios que no existen en San Marcos Tlacoyalco. Es decir, otro de los ámbitos que hay que mencionar, y viene más adelante, es el índice de vulnerabilidad, que en el caso de la región Inguigua comprende muchos municipios que se encuentran en una dimensión de vulnerabilidad crítica y o aguda, ¿no? Entonces, eso implica también que una persona que enferma en San Marcos y quiere atenderse ante un hospital de segundo o tercer nivel tiene que viajar a Tehuacán, a Tlacotepec o a la ciudad de Puebla. No puede solventar ese derecho humano a la salud en su propia comunidad. Entonces, eso implica nuevamente descentrar la idea del encierro, porque las personas no podían mantenerse en la comunidad solventando esos desafíos, ¿no? Y lo que representó el llamado de este libro era muy concordante con lo que nosotros veníamos observando, porque en San Marcos hemos documentado a lo largo de algunos años un amplio conjunto de rituales que propician lo que llamamos ahí el cuidado, pero también la sanación del territorio, ¿no? Que igual en inglés, cuando traducimos la palabra healing, no se entiende, porque realmente sanar el territorio en la clave del pueblo Inguigua tiene que ver con hacer concertar las voces de sujetos socioterritoriales que no solamente son nosotras y nosotros como vivientes, en la clave como occidental, ¿no?, sino son los ancestros, son las entidades anímicas del territorio, son la dueñidad de la montaña, son los seres que no son totalmente humanos, pero se reconocen como ancestralidades, ¿no?, como los runde, los chantiles, ¿no? Entonces, cuando ellos hablan de sanar el territorio, hablan del diálogo intercultural, vamos a plantearlo, que se establece no solamente con los vivos, sino también con aquellos que Occidente llama los no vivos, ¿no?, o los muertos, ¿no?, o los ancestros, los antepasados. Y ya les planteaba, por ejemplo, en el caso del pueblo Inguigua, hay ancestros humanos, como digamos abuelo y abuela, ¿no?, que reconocemos como nuestra ancestralidad, pero también hay otro tipo de subjetividades, ¿no? Ahí entramos en una zona gris de conceptos y categorías que habría que problematizar, pero digamos entes, ¿no?, seres que no son totalmente humanos, pero se reconocen como antepasados, ¿no? Ese es el caso de los chantiles. Por ejemplo, cuando yo le pregunté a los abuelitos, abuelitas allá, ¿qué es un chantil? ¿O qué nos distingue los chantiles? que propiamente son figuras que aparecen ahora en los entierros, en las labranzas, en los campos de cultivo. Son seres que están sentaditos con los brazos entrecruzados, y ellos dicen, pues lo único que nos distingue es que ellos devoraban de sus propios hijos, ¿no? Y nosotros, a partir del aprendizaje de que eso estaba mal, ¿no? Decidimos ya no hacerlo, ¿no? Hablan pues de un momento de la creación del mundo y de la destrucción del mundo donde los chantiles tenían esa práctica, ¿no? Entonces hay algo ahí que es como complejo de entender de la cosmovisión y cosmoaudición, pero que sí los distingue, es decir, son como nosotros, pero tenían un conjunto de prácticas socioculturales que no nos pertenecen, ¿no? Entonces, por ejemplo, los tlalmanalis, ¿no? Que tienen que ver mucho con el don, la exacerbación del don comunitario, de lo que hablaba Floriberto Díaz desde siempre, tiene que ver no solamente con hacer un altar de agradecimiento a los dones que la tierra nos otorga, sino es la fiesta, pues, ¿no? Y es algo que en el capítulo documentamos, ¿no? Las labradas de cera, las circulares, las fiestas en los barrios, en las comunidades, en las secciones en San Marcos, correspondían a un anhelo de cultivar el vínculo comunitario. Es decir, estas ceremonias, vamos a decirlo, pero que en realidad son, nosotros lo planteamos como el cultivo de la cercanía en la comunidad, tienen que ver con que al final siempre se comparte lo que la otra familia no tiene. Por ejemplo, si este año no se me dio el frijol y a mi vecino sí se le dio, hay un intercambio, hay un trueque, ¿no? Pero hay un trueque no solamente de las semillas, ¿no? Sino también hay un trueque de la palabra, ¿no? Hay un trueque del conocimiento, hay un trueque de la experiencia, ¿no? Son esos momentos donde las personas hablaban, ¿no? Sobre quién había fallecido, cómo se había dado la enfermedad en una familia, ¿no? Si había alguna crisis, ¿no? Si había una situación de preocupación, digamos, que habría que atender. Es decir, en esos contextos que no se suspendieron, ¿no? Sino se llevaron a cabo, se daba cuenta, ¿no? que la comunidad estaba socializando esos aprendizajes y experiencias de la sindemia, ¿no? Y esta, por ejemplo, gráfica tiene que ver con esas defunciones, ¿no? Que ya articulan la prevalencia de morbilidades en la comunidad. Como ustedes saben, en nuestro país pues hay una prevalencia importante de hipertensión, de diabetes, de enfermedades cardiovasculares y de otras, ¿no? Que también tiene incluso que ver con la dimensión socioemocional, y que en la comunidad estaban también siendo problematizadas porque se despertó, ¿no? La pregunta en torno a ¿por qué enfermábamos más que antes? Es decir, ¿por qué cuando los abuelitos hablaban de cómo habían sido otras pandemias no referían que hubiera habido tantos decesos, ¿no? Y eso lo contextualizaban en torno al cambio en la alimentación, ¿no? Sobra decir, como como un contexto también de la comunidad, que San Marcos Tlacoyalco cambió radicalmente a través de un sismo, el de 1973, que transformó radicalmente el territorio, ¿no? Incentivó los flujos migratorios a Estados Unidos y otras partes de México, pero también transformó la vivienda tradicional, ¿no? Que eso es algo que siempre van a referir los habitantes de San Marcos como una variable que perturbó todo el sistema normativo propio. Es decir, cuando en el gobierno de Luis Echeverría enviaron tabiques, blocks y tejas de metal, eso cambió radicalmente, ¿no? La casa tradicional del pueblo inguigua, que era basada en materiales propios del territorio, biodinámicos, ¿no? Situados, ¿no? En las necesidades meteorológicas, climatológicas, incluso sísmicas, se perturbaron radicalmente, ¿no? Entonces, estas cifras, ¿no? Que nuevamente mostraban a Puebla como a veces el cuarto, el quinto, el sexto estado con mayor mortalidad por COVID entre pueblos originarios a nivel nacional, en los estudios referían también la prevalencia con otras enfermedades. Entonces, fue importante para el capítulo referir cómo el cambio a partir del Tratado de Libre Comercio con América del Norte perturbó la alimentación tradicional, porque ya les hablaba, ¿no? Entre 73 y 92 hubo un cambio radical en los sistemas normativos propios que tienen que ver con la alimentación. Estos migrantes, ¿no? Y los circuitos migratorios empezaron a incentivar el consumo alimenticio de otro tipo de productos, ¿no? Los llamados productos ultraprocesados, y eso cambió radicalmente el entorno, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, ahorita hablamos de eso. Ajá. Luego, digamos, hacíamos un eje transversal entre los casos, los incidentes, pero después la mortalidad, ¿no? Que nuevamente tenía en Puebla el cuarto o quinto estado, ¿no? Constantemente de incidentes de mortalidad por COVID, lo cual también nos hablaba, les digo, no solamente de un conjunto de toma de decisiones, ¿no? Individuales, sino de violencias estructurales y sistémicas, ¿no? Que tenían que ver, como lo referíamos, con el campo laboral, con el ámbito económico, con la precariedad en el acceso a algunos derechos, ¿no? Humanos, bueno, salud, educación, ¿no? Porque también, por cierto, incentivar proyectos de educación virtual asincrónica era muy difícil, ¿no? En entornos con una brecha digital atroz, ¿no? Este es un mapa del grado de vulnerabilidad de la población mexicana en el entorno de COVID, y todo el Valle de Tehuacán, ¿no? Todo el sur del estado de Puebla son municipios donde se refería, ¿no? que el entorno social, cultural, económico, político implicaba municipios en situación de vulnerabilidad crítica y aguda. Y además, no olvidemos, lo referíamos también en la contribución, 19 municipios colindantes con el municipio de Tlacotepec de Benito Juárez son municipios de alerta de género, ¿no? Entonces, además de la violencia ya estructural y sistémica, se añade la violencia feminicida, ¿no? La violencia que vulnera la vida de las mujeres, ¿no? Y la violencia que compromete los derechos humanos de lo que nosotros planteamos como ese primer frente del COVID, ¿no? Esa madre jefa de familia que vio vulnerados sus derechos económicos en el contexto de la sindemia y tuvo que encontrar diversas formas de obtener un ingreso económico, ¿no? Y que paradójicamente en ese mismo contexto se agravaron los incidentes de violencia doméstica. Eso también lo estuvimos reflexionando ampliamente, ¿no? Y bueno, finalmente quisiera platicarles que hubo diversas iniciativas en el contexto Inguigua para intentar, ¿no?, situar, ¿no?, la importancia de comprender qué estaba produciendo la sindemia de COVID en el contexto de los pueblos originarios, ¿no? Por ejemplo, la Universidad Intercultural se incentivó en la posibilidad de producir materiales didácticos, pedagógicos, infografías, cápsulas de radio, voceos en la radio comunitaria y en la radio de las juntas auxiliares, con pertinencia intercultural, ¿no?, involucrando la lengua originaria, ¿no? Y eso es algo que también considero que fue una contribución importante, ¿no?, aunque uno de los grandes temas que desde esta época veíamos, ¿no?, y que hemos hablado en muchos foros, ¿no?, que tiene que ver con la transición de la palabra hablada a la palabra escrita, es que muy pocas personas en el contexto comunitario de San Marcos leen la lengua, ¿no? O sea, la hablan perfectamente, son casi 9,000 habitantes, ¿no?, en San Marcos Tlacoyalco que hablan la lengua, pero no la escriben, por ende no saben cómo leerla, ¿no? Entonces, este tipo de esfuerzos tenía más que ver con las directrices que el gobierno federal y estatal planteaba para acercar los contenidos de la Jornada Nacional de Sana Distancia a los pueblos originarios. Pero evidentemente fue un acercamiento, pues, performativo, porque si ustedes van a una comunidad donde no existe aún una norma de escritura hegemónica, pues las personas van a decir, pues no sé qué dice ahí, ¿no? Porque no saben cómo escribirla, ¿no? Sí la hablan, pero no la leen, ¿no? Entonces ahí hay otro gran tema, ¿no?, que podríamos plantear como un gran desafío, ¿no? Por eso es que les decía que había un amplio abanico de experiencias a través de las cuales universidades como la Intercultural incentivaba el conocimiento, hacía cápsulas de radio y también perifoneos, ¿no?, en la comunidad, ¿no? Entonces, algo con lo que quisiera cerrar es con algunas reflexiones muy específicas, ¿no? Lo último que nos permite fortalecer este capítulo es el tema de la salud tradicional, ¿no? Bajo los parámetros interculturales de las mujeres sabedoras de San Marcos Tlacoyalco, ¿no? Miren, tuvimos la fortuna en los meses de la tercera ola sindémica o pandémica de colaborar y de acompañar y de escuchar sobre todo a muchas sabedoras, ¿no?, que en el contexto Inguigua de San Marcos nos compartían el conjunto de remedios que ellas implementaron para poder acompañar a esos habitantes de la comunidad que no tenían acceso a la salud, ¿no?, y participamos de algunos conversatorios, de algunas entrevistas, de algunos recorridos etnográficos, ¿no? Donde ellas nos compartieron en su riqueza el tipo de tisanas, el tipo de ungüentos, el tipo de medicina tradicional que implementaron, ¿no? Y sobre eso hay mucho que plantear. Hemos publicado también un recetario, ¿no? Donde hay remedios, ¿no? Donde hay medicina, pues, donde hay prácticas terapéuticas, ¿no? Que nos compartieron las sabedoras y sabedores de la comunidad. Y eso es algo que hay que también poner en la mesa con un conjunto de preguntas problematizadoras, ¿no? Porque cuando hemos hablado de esto, digamos, sigue existiendo ese precario diálogo horizontal entre lo que podríamos concebir como la medicina convencional occidental y esa medicina otra, ¿no? Siempre se refiere que, o sea, en los foros, que este tipo de conocimientos pues son subalternos, no son científicos, no tienen una validez, ¿no? Pero las sabedoras en la comunidad nos platicaron, y eso está registrado, todo el seguimiento que hicieron de diversos enfermos y enfermas de COVID y cómo, digamos, implementaron remedios que vienen involucrando desde hace pues muchas décadas, ¿no? O sea, no fue algo que surgió en la pandemia, ¿no? Sino fue algo que eso es lo más fuerte de entender, los entornos de vulnerabilidad se activaron, ¿no? Es como si se recordaran, es como si se volvieran a ser presentes, ¿no? Y entonces fue muy significativo la transmisión intergeneracional de la experiencia, porque donde nos hemos quedado es en que diversas universidades hoy están haciendo el esfuerzo de, a través de proyectos integradores, ¿no? Interinstitucionales, dar cuenta de estas prácticas terapéuticas y medicinales para, digamos, robustecer en el escenario de ese diálogo con la otra medicina una horizontalidad, ¿no? Para que no sea desdeñada y no sea como sí, de forma displicente mirada, ¿no? Entonces, ese tipo de aprendizajes, conocimientos, experiencias, sentires, habitares, es algo que nos llevamos siempre en la experiencia del trabajo en comunidad, en territorio, porque de verdad nos queda como la pregunta en torno a si es una respuesta desde esa vulnerabilidad, ¿no? Que niega la vida de miles de personas por considerarlas execrables, no importantes, no significativas, ¿no? Porque eso es lo que expresa el racismo institucional, que no mira, digamos, ¿no? a las poblaciones más vulnerables, o siempre ha sido una estrategia de vida contra la muerte, ¿no? Que propicia el capital, lo colonial o lo patriarcal. Entonces, son preguntas que nos hacemos porque, digamos, desde la mirada de la resistencia de los pueblos nos hace la invitación a acompañar, digamos, estos conocimientos, no solamente en la excepcionalidad de la historia, sino en esas corrientes que siempre están presentes, aunque no sean miradas, ¿no? Entonces, igual como las colegas lo han referido, estoy súper abierto a cualquier pregunta, duda o inquietud, y les agradezco mucho la atención, compañeras, compañeros.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much,
Sí.
Dr. Guillermo López Varela. I'm going to make a short translation of his presentation. Basically, the emphasis is on the issue that we focus on, community response to COVID-19, and also to the action on how to regain control over their health. The one difference that he mentions is sanar. So in English we use the term healing. However, it's not the same. It's not the same translation for. I think they're leaving, huh? It was a pleasure meeting you, Helen. Okay, we have still a few. Helen had to drop. Helen se fue, la doctora Helen se fue, pero les manda saludos y dice que se pueden comunicar con ella. So,
Thank you so much. I do have to sign off, but I want to say thank you to all, and I appreciate it very much, and let's stay in touch.
Okay, so maybe before you hang, I should ask if anyone has any questions for you. Do you have
Okay,
just...
Okay. Yeah, give me just a second.
¿Alguien ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta para la doctora Elena? Dígame. Por favor, alguien me apoya.
Aquí, si quieren, para que los vean.
Pues mira, porque está la cámara.
Sí tengo una pregunta.
Uy, está apagado.
Ay, no, eso está apagado, sí. Soy reportero especializado en cambio climático desde hace 15 años y vamos rumbo a la COP30 que se va a celebrar en la ciudad de Belém, en Brasil. Y me recuerda la primer cumbre que se llevó a cabo en Brasil, que fue precisamente la cumbre de la Tierra en 1992, cuando se descubrió que había una capa de ozono dañada y que estaba perjudicando a la humanidad. Y de ahí a la actualidad he tenido la fortuna de estar en esas convenciones marco de Naciones Unidas que se lleva a cabo cada año en diferentes países, ¿no? Yo comencé en Cancún, en Ciudad de México, en la COP16. Vamos rumbo a la COP30. Y sin embargo veo muy pocos avances. Mientras tanto que el planeta cada vez se va contaminando más. He seguido con atención sus ponencias y tanto basura como el tema de la ropa, como las tabiqueras, como la contaminación tan grande que existe en el planeta y que a pesar de que México cuenta con la Ley General de Cambio Climático, cuyo espíritu es precisamente la mitigación y la adaptación, pues no vemos los resultados esperados. Vemos ciudades grandes que no cuentan con plantas tratadoras de aguas residuales. Y me recuerda que en Lima se llevó a cabo una convención donde presentaron un libro que debería de estar en las aulas. El título de ese libro se llama El cambio climático en las aulas. Y realmente pues no se ha implementado, ¿no? a casi 15 años de distancia. Y que ese tema sigue siendo muy interesante, pero a la vez muy olvidado y que no se ha llevado a cabo en las aulas. En lo personal, yo durante 2 años di conferencias en primarias, en secundarias, preparatorias y universidades acerca del cambio climático. Y yo creo que de alguna manera tenemos que invertir en los jóvenes, porque son el futuro. Ellos son los que tienen la oportunidad de crear un mundo mejor, así como lo especificaron en la poesía estudiantil. Y bueno, pues esa es mi participación y preguntarle si usted ha participado en las convenciones marco de Naciones Unidas, si ha asistido a alguna COP, que así es conocida como COP, ¿no? La conferencia de las partes, donde asisten por lo menos 196 países, los representantes de 196 países más la Unión Europea. Y bueno, pues el Acuerdo Histórico de París, 2015, tampoco se llevó a cabo. La Agenda 2030, que viene como consecuencia de la Agenda 21 y del Protocolo de Kioto y que, insisto, ¿no? A la fecha vemos un avance muy lento. No sé si pudiera contestarme qué acciones debemos de tener, de hacer, qué políticas públicas debemos de implementar a efecto de tener un planeta verde. Gracias.
Please, Leo.
So, Dr. Bond, the question is, have you ever been into the Conference of the Parties, have a participation there, and which concrete actions do you think we can integrate into education to really fight the big pollution issues? Because he doesn't see concrete actions to solve those environmental problems, and how to build a frame of effective educational programs.
Thank you. That was a wonderful question, and thank you for asking it. And that was an area I don't think I was certainly as clear. That curriculum, I showed 2 pictures of the Smithsonian goals that center justice. So the recommendation would be to implement more education around climate change and education for sustainable development, more education around climate issues and issues of justice and how they, interact with that. So basically, if we think about the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 4, my main recommendation, and I was just at some UN meetings in New York just last week, virtually, and they were talking about that we can't move forward in this fight against climate change and this fight for justice and equality without education, that education was absolutely critical. And especially the kinds of education that focuses on what climate change is, what is sustainability, and this idea of education for sustainability, ESD, which is very huge, very important. So that is, and what this book focuses on, centering justice in that education. So justice-centered education for climate change and education for sustainable development. And part of that is understanding, what are the sustainable development goals and how important they are. And I know there's such good work going on, in Mexico and South America and many of these issues. I wish there was more of it going on in the US, but that's the work that we're trying to do. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, doctor. La doctora piensa que es importante implementar programas educativos alrededor de los temas de justicia y derechos ambientales. No podemos avanzar sin entrar realmente en una reforma crítica, educativa, que capacite a los sujetos, a los individuos. Hay que centrar el discurso de la justicia en el ambiente educativo y, emplear términos correctos, saber que es un entorno sustentable y, reconoce la doctora que el avance en México es notable, pero lento, en comparación a lo mejor con los Estados Unidos, pero que se está haciendo.
Sí, muchas gracias. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you. So thank you, Dr. Helen Bond, for being here today. And we are almost closing this presentation. The general review maybe gets in touch with Dr. Guillermo Lopez Varela. My short bio, it's really short. I'm a professor, research professor here at the el Instituto de Ciencias Sociales y Humanidades de la Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. Salud. My first degree is in anthropology, cultural anthropology, and my last degree is also in anthropology. So I did my undergrad at la Universidad de las Américas, Puebla, and also I did my master's and PhD in Canada. I did my MA in the University of Guelph and my PhD at the University of Western Ontario. So my research interest has been and always been in understanding the state relations among and between the indigenous communities that live in urban areas, not only in Canada, but also I try to convey some ideas while living and working in Mexico as well. So my other interests flow around transnationalism, human rights among indigenous communities, indigenous diaspora, and environmental justice comes along with my research on human rights. So my first claim of being here today to talk about this chapter is trying to convey some of the ideas that Dr. Varela mentioned, that is how the community responds from a local level to the pandemic, how it creates a bridge between the health system that is not there, and at the same time, what Dr. Bond mentioned about agency. The agency is present because the community responded from their own resources to the pandemic. And by the way, they protected the natural resources and the nature. Some of those responses, and I acknowledge the Universidad Intercultural del Estado de Puebla, to their authorities and also to some of the professors, incluyendo la ingeniera Margarita López, who works there and who also provided the tools for us to work during our field work and the times that we've been there understanding the community response. There's different issues here. One of them relates to the Hawaii, that is a natural reservoir where the community had access to water, but not also water, but also rituals. And the natural medicine, the traditional medicine that comes along hand by hand with the local response for healing or sanar. There is in medical anthropology the term of getting the balance. So they needed the balance not through biomedicine, but through the ethnomedicine. Another part of our research that it's worth to cite is the construction of environment, and also how do we understand the degradation of it, as well as healthy communities. Our construction brings back from organic intellectuals that are indigenous, most of them academic, and we try to convey those ideas and those perceptions and construction of an epistemology that is not constructed from Occident or from the way that we think, and it's called the North, the global North. That is, I think, one of the major deconstructions that our chapter provides to everyone that would like to read it. I think it belongs as the whole set, like the whole composition of the book. It brings new insights to think, and not only think, but act and apply the knowledge within our communities and the places that we do well. It is important to note that reading it physically or electronically doesn't mean that it stays within the notes and the writing, but it's an invitation for you to think about environment, justice, health, the future and the present of every single being, human being here, and the nature that surrounds us. I hope that this presentation brought together new ideas and refresh ways to work in light of the challenges that we face, not only in Mexico, but in different parts of the world. Thank you. I'm gonna make a small and short translation. The translation is that nuestra investigación resalta el papel de las comunidades indígenas, sobre todo la comunidad en San Marcos, Tlacoyalco, Ninjihua, que está ahí presente, no solamente en las notas, sino que reconocemos a la Universidad Intercultural del Estado de Puebla, en la Unidad Académica de San Marcos, que nos ha brindado y abierto las puertas, a la ingeniera Margarita López, que de cierta manera ella ha contribuido a nuestra estancia y a hacerla un poco más significativa para nosotros. Esto conlleva al trabajo que hemos realizado para beneficio de las comunidades, entender los procesos que se viven a partir del COVID-19 y la respuesta de las comunidades a una crisis sanitaria. Esa crisis sanitaria representó lo que decía el doctor Guillermo López Varela, un reto porque el sistema de salud en México no se daba abasto. Entonces las comunidades a nivel local respondieron a esa necesidad ¿Y cómo respondieron? Pues de diferente manera, por ejemplo, las canastas de comida, lo que es el Hawái, diferentes actividades del regreso a la medicina tradicional, que de cierta manera marca un corte de lo que es la medicina, biomedicina a la etnomedicina, ¿no? Y el regreso a utilizar las plantas medicinales para poder buscar esos equilibrios de salud y poder sanar. Los invito a que lean todo el libro, no solamente ese capítulo, sino todo el libro, porque representa una aportación significativa a una transformación que hacemos un llamado para la justicia ambiental, para un lugar en donde se pueda vivir mejor y que se busque una salud o un bienestar, no solamente para México, sino para las diferentes partes del mundo, que compartimos este lugar. Muchas gracias. We open for questions. Any comments? You don't have to ask, but comments. Yes, please.
Voy a leer en inglés una pregunta que tengo.
Sí, por favor, gracias.
¿Se la puedo hacer a las autoras? ¿Ya se fueron?
Sí, no, ahí están.
Thank you. I consider this is a very interesting book, very much in line with the terrible times we are living in. The post-pandemic world has brought with greater economic inequality, more pollution, and the rise of the far right, which denies climate change, opposes vaccines, and disregards environmental issues. Considering that under capitalism there's no ethical consumption and the socio-environmental struggles and are an extensions of the class struggle, I would like to know if there are any state institutions in the global north that somehow regulate extractive industries and projects in the global south beyond consumption. Finally, thank you for your presentation and also for the open access of the book.
I see. Very good. So please, I don't know if both of you, Dr. Conrad or who would like to respond?
I can just very quickly, so the question about institutions in the global north that regulate extractivism, I can definitely say I'm not an expert in this specific field, I can't really give you names. I would imagine that there is something like that, because that should be regulated to a certain extent politically, it should be regulated environmentally. We do know that there are a lot of drawbacks and a lot of kind of problems in regulating this. I mean, otherwise, I suppose illegal extractivism wouldn't even exist, right? I mean, it wouldn't be an issue. I just think that, to kind of go a little bit away from the question, because as I said, I can't really give you the names. I do think that one thing that we need to pay attention to are the kind of different groups that are involved in these processes. I'm specifically thinking, we very often think in terms of, there is an act.
Sorry, Dr. Conrad, you froze. I don't know, Savannah, would you like to retake or? Oh yeah, thank you. We miss you. There was error in the connection. Just like
Okay.
1 minute.
So I was just saying that that what is important to look at are the kind of actors that are involved in these processes. Institutions that would be regulating this is one of those actors. As I said, I can't really give you the names, but I do think that except for institutions, we kind of should look also at the broader picture in a sense of seeing at the types of relationships and at the actors that are involved in this. To what extent it's actually correct to look at sort of active global north extracting various benefits from the passive global south. To what extent this is a correct framing is a big question. I mean, to me, this looks very colonial and colonialist. I do think that it's important to understand that national elites in the global south, they also collide with the global north, because otherwise, these things wouldn't happen. There are also people in the countries who actually the local people who actually profit from this. Very often these are kind of on the governmental level or any other kind of power positions. So I think that while it's important to invest and to kind of to invest into those institutions, that would be able to control, as we talk about extractivism or any other types of environmental relations. I do think that it's important to consider also a broader picture and the kind of political, sociocultural, economic, but also environmental consequences that various groups contribute to, because I don't believe in institutions per se doing certain things, necessarily ruining everything or kind of bringing justice. I think that institutions are just kind of part of the picture. But yeah, that would be, if Savannah wants to add something, but otherwise I guess that would be. Maybe I can also respond on behalf of both of us. We don't necessarily come from exactly that field. I would say political ecology or something like this. We just don't work in this. We do work in the environmental humanities and cultural anthropology primarily, and therefore our takes on environmental justice, I guess, are very theoretical in that sense, and we don't really work with institutions.
Thank you. Hacemos una traducción. ¿Sí? Okay, we will translate in a very short way.
Bueno, la doctora piensa que no todo el daño que hay en el sur global viene de fuera, es decir, hay instituciones internas que también se enriquecen o se benefician, actores políticos, instituciones locales que también pues, ven beneficios en estas acciones. Entonces, se tiene que, a lo mejor la doctora cree que no es un tema tanto de instituciones, no es de encargarles o delegarles a las instituciones que creen programas y todo esto, sino más pues, en la cuestión humanitaria, la capacitación, ¿no? Lo que decíamos hace rato de la educación ambiental puede ser donde se apuntale este cambio, ¿no? en los sujetos.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gracias. Do we have any other comments, questions? Yes. Okay. Lo paso.
Well, hi, my name is Fatima. I'm a student of political science, and I would like to thank all of you for this book. I will have to read it, but I really like to give this question. What will be the principal key to recognize environmental justice in our communities? Because yesterday we were discussing in our class that progress didn't mean global justice, and it's like in this century all globalizations and social media gives an idea of in all people that we were young and we have that meaning of progress, but I think it didn't mean environmental justice. Thank you.
So please.
So the question would be how to achieve kind of justice, and whether the global approach would be the kind of the right approach in that sense, right?
Yeah, that would be the principal key to look for.
Right. I mean, I think it's a part of the picture again. because I do think that there are global crises per se, things like climate crisis, for instance, we can really definitely classify it as a global crisis, but I do think that there are also other various types of environmental crises. I mean, we can talk about biodiversity loss, for example, right? We can talk about species extinction, we can talk about pollution as such, and so on and so forth. And so if we approach those problems in such a way, we actually understand that many of them are localized. And therefore, maybe this global approach is not necessarily very productive in every specific case. And I think that this is what the book has also been trying to kind of communicate, chapter to chapter, that while we do live in crisis, like the world is in crisis, we can really state this, different groups of people, different nations, different individuals, different countries experience those crises very differently. It does depend on where you are, global north versus the global south. It does depend on who you are. If we talk about, for instance, BIPOC communities in the United States, they would experience certain things very differently compared to, say, white people in the United States, and so on and so forth. And that there are problems, the environmental problems, they're actually very different in different countries. And therefore, fighting even the same problem like pollution, there is no unified solution that could potentially be applied in every country. So to me, and that's, I guess, what the book has been trying to communicate again, it's important to recognize or acknowledge the kind of global nature of the crisis, but it's essential to approach those crises as local crises and to tackle those issues in precise and specific ways that would be appropriate for those nations, for those individuals, for those countries, for those specific circumstances and times.
Bueno, dando respuesta a lo que preguntaba la compañera, la doctora, hace referencia a que hay crisis globales, que eso se entiende muy bien, pero que la clave para esos problemas es dar soluciones locales a esos problemas globales, y la clave entonces radica en contextualizar eficientemente los entornos. Si logras saber cómo ese problema global afecta específicamente a esa población, a ese grupo, a ese entorno, entonces encuentras soluciones más eficientes. La contextualización sería la clave.
¿Puedo hacerla en español? La pregunta.
Sí.
Hola, mi nombre es Stephanie. Mi pregunta es para Savannah. La primera es, ¿cómo llegaste a interesarte por estudiar el problema de fast fashion en el mercado Cantanmanto y si alguna vez has visitado este mercado?
This is a question for Savannah. I would like to ask if you have visited the camp that you mentioned about waste or the clothes waste market. Is that a market? And for how long you've been researching? Oh yeah, and how you became interested in researching in that site, like how you came across your site or your focus of research.
So thank you for the question. In the chapter, I write, I think, a paragraph. I have not visited the Cantanmanto market, so this chapter is more theoretically based and based on scholarly resources and articles. So I have not been there. I mean, you can find a lot of articles, documentaries around the Cantanmanto market, and also recently, last year, some part of it, or quite a big part of it, also burnt down. That was the answer for the one question. And how I became interested. Well, I would say, first of all, in a private way, I do like fashion, I do like clothes. And then I work in a sector, in the environmental humanities, also with topics of waste, and then, you know, how do those things connect with each other. And then also in Austria, or also in Germany, we have a lot of these charity bins. And, you know, what do you do with clothes that are quite good or still good, but you just don't wear them anymore? You either go to a flea market and maybe sell it yourself, or where do you bring them? So you mostly drop it and bring it to charity bins. And then I was just, you know, interested, where do those clothes come or go to? And also I was once in Nicaragua. It's already, I think, over 10 years ago. And our luggage didn't come to us. So we pretty much had to buy something, and witnessed large bales coming into Nicaragua next to our hotel. And it was, you know, clothes that you saw they were worn, but still good enough to be resold. So all those thoughts and, you know, kind of life experiences and where I work at, in the field I work at, kind of culminated, and then I thought I could write something about that. And also within our project, Air and Environmental Health, we're looking at air pollution, at different ways of how air is polluted, how this, you know, we're localized different air pollution spots in some kind of way. And yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. Bueno, traducimos o ya lo dejamos así. You want me to translate, or you want to keep it like that, because we are almost closing? Yeah? Okay. I think we came across a very nice dynamic of presenting this book to you, and at the same time to answer a few of the questions you had. Espero que hayan disfrutado esta dinámica que creamos para poder expresarles lo que este libro conlleva, los capítulos, aunque sean breves, porque hay más, de qué se tratan, y que puedan ustedes tener la oportunidad de leerlo. So we really thank you for the opportunity of being here. Thank you, Tatiana, and thank you, Savannah. Hope this is not the first and the last time we will see each other. And thank you to you guys for being here today. Gracias por estar todos aquí.
Thank you very much, Maria. And thank you also to the audience for being here. We really appreciate this opportunity to promote the book and to, as I said at the very beginning of this launch, to revisit the chapters. We do think it's a very important topic, and we're very happy that you've actually taken care of kind of organizing this, you know, and spending all the time and effort kind of accommodating us. We know that it took quite some time to actually find this date and the time and everything, and we do appreciate kind of your help with, I mean, generally your contribution to the book. It was really lovely to have you at the conference a couple of years ago, I suppose now, and then to have you and the team contribute to the book, and now, as I said, to kind of take care instead of us, you know, doing all the work and helping us promote the book. Thank you.
No, thank you to you. And also, I want to acknowledge the work that our engineers here at the Institute, they worked so hard for you guys being here today. Otherwise, this transmission and everything was not possible. So I appreciate Dr. Ingeniero Edgar y el otro ingeniero que es Eduardo. Permítanme. ¿Cuál es su nombre, Miguel? Omar. And the engineer Omar for being here today and support us with this work that is really incredible. And thank you. La doctora Conrad les agradece, dice que está totalmente agradecida tanto de haber participado en un congreso que fue el detonante de esta publicación, y posteriormente la participación como coautores en un capítulo que está en ese libro. Y los invita a todos para que pues lo lean y también la contacten. Gracias. Thank you. Pues, chao.
Bye.
Bye. Ahorita hay un receso de comida.